So I think we're going to get started, colleagues. I think we have everyone we require. Awesome. Thank you. So welcome everyone to Council meeting number 38 here on Tuesday, October 4th at 6:30 p.m. in Council chambers. Council did convene in closed prior to this meeting, so the agenda has been adopted. I'll look for a council colleague to read the land acknowledgement, please. Thank you, Councillor Charkian.
The municipality of North Grenville acknowledges that the municipality operates on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe. We honor the historic relationship of the Haudenosaunee and Huron-Wendat peoples to this land. We recognize all First Nations, Métis and Inuit who call North Grenville their home. We respect and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with all Indigenous peoples, and we look forward to continuing this conversation and fostering the path towards reconciliation.
Thank you. And on that note, I do want to thank all of those in our community who came out on September 30th to mark the second annual National Truth and Reconciliation Day. It was wonderful to be able to unveil a piece of art done by a long-standing local artist who was generous with his time and contribution to the municipality. So it was a great day, and some have been asking how we plan to move forward. So I just wanted to remind people that certainly I think it's the appetite of this council, and I think a future council, upon recommendations of staff, to establish an Indigenous advisory circle, and certainly that committee/circle would be fairly instrumental moving forward in our efforts to advance truth and reconciliation, not just, of course, for September 30th, but ongoing throughout the municipality for the next number of years. So we look forward to that. The other thing I wanted to mention before we get to our presentations and delegations is, I think it's certainly warranted that we congratulate our community, thank our municipal staff, a heartfelt thanks to so many municipal staff who stepped up for the international plowing match, over 1,100 volunteers, which I think has been well established in the community, and Councillor Sullivan certainly co-led very ably that committee for volunteer recruitment. And we do note that our public works staff in particular were instrumental in making sure that grounds were up to par and well traveled for the nearly 70,000 people who came to the international plowing match. So big thanks on behalf of council to our own staff, not just of course in public works, but in ECDEV and communication and tourism and parks and rec, and of course public works and corporate strategy for doing their part. Fire services and emergency protective services was another important player in making sure that the 70,000 people who showed up were safe and all the resources were in place. We had paramedic services on site as well, and the United Counties was also a very crucial partner for what was a very successful event. So thank you to Mr. Dyke and all members of the senior management team on down for your important work on the very successful IPM, and it was North Grenville's largest event ever, and we'll probably take a breather before we do it all over again, but a great event. Also, this evening, we have a resolution that has been presented to mark the 22nd Annual Childcare Worker and Early Childhood Education Appreciation Day. And to that end, I have a motion, and just to be clear, Ms. Workman, this motion was generated by whom?
It was generated by CUPE and the MTJB.
Okay, more than just babysitting, which is one of our local daycare providers. So we've done this before, council colleagues, if you recall, and this is to mark Annual Childcare Worker and Early Childhood Education Appreciation Day. And the motion is as follows. Whereas years of research confirms the benefits of high-quality early learning and childcare for young children's intellectual, emotional, social, physical development, and later life outcomes, whereas childcare promotes the well-being of children in response to the needs of families, a broader community, by supporting quality of life so that citizens can fully participate in and contribute to the economic and social life of their communities, whereas trained and knowledgeable registered early childhood educators and childcare staff are key to early learning and childcare programs, and whereas registered early childhood educators, also known as ECEs, and childcare workers will be vital to the success of the Canada-wide early learning and childcare system, be it resolved that October 18th, 2022 be designated as the 22nd Annual Childcare Worker and ECE Appreciation Day in recognition of education, dedication, and the commitment of childcare workers to children, their families, and the quality of life of those in North Grenville. Do I have a mover and a seconder for that motion? Thank you. Councillors Barclay and O'Sullivan. Any comments or questions in regard to the motion? See any? I would like to report that the United Counties, as the upper tier level of government, had reported today that over 75% of registered child cares, whether they are in-home private child care facilities, daycares, or licensed out-of-home daycares, have opted in to the $10 a day program. So it's an amazing level of uptake, and it certainly will ensure, I think, more affordability to families, and that everyone sort of becomes connected to a regional daycare sort of network where there are lots of opportunities for training, for peer-to-peer support, and for learning. So it was great to hear that the uptake on that program is very, very significant. So the motion has been moved and seconded, so I will call the question. All in favor, please. Thank you. So that passes. And without further ado, also on the agenda this evening is the County Road 43 widening project. And I understand that we have Jessica Carroll, who's with Macintosh Perry as a communication specialist. And for context, as I'm sure Ms. Carroll will explain, Mac Perry has been retained to oversee project management for the very complex County Road 43 expansion project. So we're happy to have you here, Ms. Carroll, so that you can give us an update on where things are at.
Thank you so much. Just make sure everybody can hear me okay. So yes, as Mayor Peckford mentioned, my name is Jessica Carroll, the Communication Coordinator of Macintosh Perry. With me today is Stan Skaggs. He's the Contract Administration Manager for the Eastern Region. Today I will be talking to you about the project communications overview for the widening of CR 43 from CR 44 to Colonnade Drive, Kemptville, Ontario. Just for the remainder of the presentation, we'll go ahead and refer to it as the project. So today we'll go over the plan outline in terms of what will be happening over the next duration of the next several years. I will be working in partnership with the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, as well as the Municipality of North Grenville, to ensure effective, accurate, and timely communications are shared with the public throughout the duration of the project. So the main components of communication strategy will include, and will be discussed today, are the Construction Liaison Committee, the project website, social media, and public announcements and media. Arguably, the most important aspect of our strategy is the Construction Liaison Committee. So I will be chairing a monthly meeting for the Project Construction Liaison Committee. This committee will be essential in maintaining engagement and open communication with key members of the community. Key personnel include the Communications Coordinator, Contract Administrator, and Project Manager from Macintosh Perry, the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville and Municipality of North Grenville Project Managers and appointed representatives, as well as Kemptville's BIA representative. Stakeholders, such as persons or businesses identified as someone who will be affected or perceives to be affected by the project, will be able to keep up to date with important construction updates through an agreed upon representative of their choosing to join this committee as well. The main stakeholders can include, but aren't limited to, emergency services, local businesses, and public works. The committee meetings will include a couple different things each month that you can be sure to be updated upon. One of the main focus will be the Milestone Calendar. So a 12-month forward rolling calendar will be provided at each monthly meeting. The importance of this calendar is to create and prioritize communication strategies while allowing the committee time to review and respond with their feedback and questions. So committee members will be provided an opportunity at these meetings to provide suggestions for items to be added to the calendar as it relates to communications for the project. Committee members will be provided 2 weeks' notice whenever possible to review and provide feedback on upcoming communications as well. Examples of the types of content that will be discussed and reviewed would be construction progress, photos and video updates, public safety messages, upcoming site activities, traffic staging plans, and detours or service disruptions. In addition, each monthly meeting, the Macintosh Perry Contact Administrator will provide a detailed project update of recent progress as well as forecasted work for the upcoming month. I will also provide a review of recent website traffic, social media engagement, new inquiries, and other communication news and updates. Essentially, the focus of this liaison committee is ultimately to provide a space for open communication, brainstorming ideas, sharing information regarding public inquiries as it relates to project communications. An easy-to-navigate project website will be created with its own standalone domain for the duration of the project. The website will house all communication information as well as detailed project information so it is readily available to the public. The site plan will include a project overview, including project details such as location, duration, and contractor information. Project photos will be housed here, as well as public notices for reference. Closures and critical information, including traffic detours, any sort of upcoming events or closures that may affect the public. A map defining the area of the project. Frequently asked questions, which will be continuously updated based on the inquiries that are received and responded to. Therefore, if the public decides they want to go to the website to find information and hopefully answer a question, the answer will already be there. If not, we will have a Contact Us page, which allows them to reach out to me with my contact information or simply fill out a form that will be connected directly to my email. In addition, we will have a useful links page that will link to web pages of key personnel and stakeholders, as well as social media for related information. Social media will be the main avenue used to communicate project information and updates to stakeholders, thus allowing the public to be informed of important updates in real time. We will be sharing information on the following platforms. So for Facebook, it will be the United Leads in Grenville Facebook page and the Municipality of North Grenville Facebook page. And on Twitter, it'll be the Leeds Grenville handle and the North Grenville handle. Scheduled posts will include upcoming milestones as previously discussed, such as photos, newsletters, announcements, public safety messages, and traffic disruptions or closures. All posts will refer back to the project website to remind the public of where to find the most up-to-date project information. Keeping in mind here, we do understand that not everybody uses social media and not everybody goes there to find their news. So everything that is posted on social media will also be available on the website to be referred back to and to ensure that there is a main hub to find information. Stakeholders are encouraged to engage with the social media posts by sharing, commenting, and liking to allow for further reach within the online community as well. Short community-oriented messages will be prepared to provide the public with additional information when needed. This will be done in a variety of formats to engage the public, including print media, notices, newsletters, email distribution, and social media posts. All content will be contingent on approval from key personnel, and the Communications Liaison Committee will have an opportunity to review and provide feedback in most circumstances 2 weeks prior to release, unless due to a time constraint or emergency, under which the key personnel will still have an opportunity to review and approve. And finally, all news media requests will be sent directly to the United County of Leeds and Grenville, a municipality of North Grenville's communication lead, to be addressed. On-site workers, contractors, and contract administration team members will be made aware not to speak to media or allow media access to the construction site at any time. But this concludes my presentation today. I want to thank you so much for your time and having me here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, and I will recognize Councillor Wilson shortly. I think the big question in the community is when, right? So this is a wonderful plan, and I'm sure we can get into the details of some of those plans, but certainly I think at this point it probably is important to let people know that owing to the addition of a new bridge for the County Road 43 expansion project, it led to considerable delays in a start time for the project, and at this time it would be anticipated, if all goes well in terms of tender documents being issued very early in the new year, the likely first step in this County Road 43 project would be the building of a new bridge, and that potentially could start in a very preliminary way, maybe late spring or in the middle of the summer, after some of the environmental considerations are taken into account when it comes to the season for frogs and birds and what have you. So Ms. Dunlop, I don't know if I've correctly stated that, but I think before we get into the details of project management, it is important to situate the timing of the project for the community. Do you have anything to add in that regard?
I do not.
Okay. So that's, from my understanding, sitting at the county's table, and as you know, there are 10 mayors that have been heavily engaged in the various permutations of this project. That is our understanding from county staff, is that the bridge is likely to come first. So some of these pieces may be many months away, but we felt it was important to hear from your team tonight, because you have been engaged on the project management side and will be working hand in hand with our community and to your point, with some of our local businesses to mitigate any impacts. That being said, at no point have we been advised at the county level that there will be major disruptions on County Road 43. It's such an essential thoroughfare. We will not see County Road 43 closed, and the existing bridge will not be demolished and rebuilt until a new bridge has been built and is functioning. So I just wanted to put that context out there if that's helpful for county colleagues. So I'll recognize Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Peckford. Just a quick question to Jessica. I was listening at the beginning of your presentation, and you mentioned the communication with BIA. Are you also going to communicate with the Chamber of Commerce? Will they be sitting at your table? I didn't hear it.
Yes.
Maybe I was.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
thank you. Yeah. I know that they would be more than wanting and willing to be at the table. Thanks.
And if I'm not mistaken, there was a preliminary meeting with the Chamber of Commerce. Ms. Dunlop, I think you can confirm that we had an initial meeting earlier this summer with staff to let members of the Chamber know what we expect to be the timeline. Ms. Dunlop, is there anything else you want to add there?
That is correct. Economic Development as well as Public Works sat down with a couple representatives from the Chamber to let them know that, yes, the project is moving forward, that we didn't have any concrete anything to give them at this point in time, but they would make sure that they were part of the communication strategy moving forward.
Okay, thanks. Other questions? Councillor Barkley?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Carroll, for your presentation. Like my council colleague, Councillor Wilson, I didn't hear the Chamber of Commerce mentioned as a key stakeholder in the Liaison, Communications Liaison Committee, but I also didn't hear OPP. Will they be at the table as well?
Yeah, so for the list of stakeholders, I didn't list all of the stakeholders, just because, I mean, considering, depending on somebody's perspective, there could be they could consider themselves a stakeholder, right? So essentially, if you consider yourself a stakeholder affected, what our recommendation or what our ask is that you come together and find a representative you want to join the committee, and that way they can be the go-between. So OPP certainly would be included as well. like emergency services, public work, local businesses, and things like that.
So it's great to have your presentation because as you can imagine, there's a great deal of anxiety out there in the community. 43 has been a failed road for quite a long time. And you mentioned traffic staging, and I'm not really clear on what you mean by traffic staging.
So traffic staging would refer to if there is a change upcoming in, say, for example, Mayor Peckford mentioned a bridge. If, say, they had to divert traffic, we would know ahead of time, and we would ensure that the public was made aware of that well ahead of time. I can't speak to any specifics construction related. Stan could actually speak to that better than I could.
Okay.
But what I mean by any sort of staging changes is if there's a change in disruption in the flow of traffic and they need to take an alternative route.
So this may be a question, if I can continue, the final question, Madam Mayor. You know, also all the commercial businesses along 43. So communication about a plan to keep the access to those businesses, you know, would be going out as well? Or I guess this is more about project management. I mean, how do we intend to keep access to the commercial businesses on 43 open?
Stan might be able to speak to that better.
Thank you, Stan.
So ultimately, the communications committee would include, guaranteed to include OPP and EMS, fire services if they're not all combined, and any other major stakeholders like that. Staging, there's going to be, you know, points of time when there are lane closures, single lane closures. We're required to maintain traffic through the roadway at all times. Access to businesses will be maintained 100% of the time. There might be an entrance, there might be two entrances into, say for instance, the Creekside Plaza. We have to actually change a culvert there. So we could possibly close that one because there's two entrances into the plaza. There's the one off the side street, I forget the name. But what we would try to do is, if we're doing work, if we're placing curbs in through an entranceway or whatever into a business, we'd try to limit it to half the entrance width at a time. And
That would be communicated to the businesses in a timely manner so that they could adjust or alert their customers?
Yes, there will be contract requirements for the contractor to notify. We as contract administrators would, in essence, make sure that happens. If it doesn't happen, they would not be allowed to do that work that day if they haven't given previous notice. I'm not sure what it is in the contract, but there's a period of time for advance notice, and if that advance notice is not given, too bad, so sad, so to speak, they'll have to wait until they give the advance notice and coordinate with the business.
Advance notice to the businesses, because I don't imagine that specific information is necessary to go out to the general public, but certainly businesses, you gave an example of Creekside Mall, they would need to let their customers or the clients know well in advance. Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Yes, and I'll recognize Councillor Strachan, but of course, I just want to recognize, obviously, the tender documents have not been issued, right? So I know some of the conversation is delving into sort of project management pieces, and of course, you don't have all that terrain yet until the tender bid is awarded. So we appreciate your capacity to answer the questions to the best of your ability tonight. However, this is still quite preliminary, but establishing the principles upon which you plan to communicate and liaise, certainly with our community and with our businesses and our residents, is very important. So thank you for your time. And if you get a question you can't answer, just let us know. Councillor Strachan.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate this information. This is a lot on communications. I almost couldn't write it fast enough, so I think that's good. This will be very helpful. When the question about when, not so much when construction is starting or anything like that, but when will information start to show up via social media or on the website? What's the start date for that, so that we can potentially start sharing that as a link for residents to find information in.
You have to speak into the mic.
Yeah, so we currently have another person communications person at MacDosh Perry who is currently developing the website. We were going to try to get it fully developed as of the end of October. Then there would be a period of time for review of that website. Like I'm not sure how it's done, but we can put the website up so that private people or specific people can look at that website and get a handle for what it's going to be like, and more or less do a review and get final approvals for it. Then the conversation we recently had was, I believe, mid-November to the end of November, December sometime, to go live with the website for your constituents or whatever, the residents of the town and stuff.
So mid-November to the end of November. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Anyone else at this stage? Director Dunlop, anything else you want to add in terms of how the municipality plans to interact with MacPerry?
The municipality will be directly involved and as part of the stakeholder committee, as well as probably there on a daily basis. But Keena and I sat down with MacPerry as well as the United Counties of Leeds and Granville, and to make sure that our stakeholder, our liaison committee, is all encompassing. The Chamber of Commerce is around the table because they will have the business impact and the business ear as we go through this, and making sure that we get the messages out on a regular basis, a consistent basis, because it will be an ever-evolving picture out there, and I think the idea of having webcams and photos available for the public to see the progress and the changes that are being made over an extended period of time as 43 develops into a beautiful boulevard.
I do think you should update the picture on your PowerPoint, right? As you likely know, we have this vision for a very green boulevard, which looks nothing like a city landscape, but much more of a country feel. And in fact, we have some renderings internally that I think would be of some comfort to the community. As you likely know, there is some concern that this turns into a speedway, not a boulevard, and we have made considerable efforts as a municipality to ensure that there are a sufficient number of trees and that there are multi-use pathways, and that really we are slowing people down, not speeding people up. So that's the spirit in which we believe that this project will be pursued, and perhaps some of those visuals that we've already begun identifying could be incorporated into some of your work as well, because there's been some good work done. The other thing I should emphasize, just for anyone who hasn't thought about it recently, is it is anticipated to be a 3-year project, owing to the considerable work needing to be done on the bridge. The bridge only has about 3 years remaining life on it. As a consequence, it is the priority at this stage, and it does extend the overall construction period for the County Road 43 upgrades. So the bridge adds definitely another year. So unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you see it, it will be a 3-year project. It means that I think some of those disruptions of which you spoke can be better managed, and we can pace ourselves accordingly. But that being said, the communication piece is absolutely vital, and this is a community who cares, I assure you. So, and we're very, very connected as a community, so that communications piece is going to be crucial to the credibility of the project, to the buy-in of the project by our community, and particularly our businesses who are directly impacted on County Road 43, and our schools and our daycares and our retirement home and our gas stations, and on it goes. So there's lots at stake, so we appreciate you coming and introducing yourselves this evening, and look forward to much more discussion down the road. No pun intended, down the road. Okay. Am I to receive a presentation? Yes? Okay. So, council colleagues, before we say goodbye to our Mac Perry comms team, project management team, I'm looking for a mover and a seconder that council receive the presentation from Macintosh Perry with respect to County Road 43 widening project communication strategy overview. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Strachan, thank you. I'll look to any other questions, comments. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, we have several items that are proposed for the consent agenda this evening. The exception, of course, is that any member may request that one of my items be pulled for discussion and voted on separately. Colleagues, you'll see the list before you, looking to see if anyone wants to pull an item from the consent agenda. Seeing nothing, then I'll look for a mover and a seconder for adoption of the consent agenda. Councillors O'Sullivan and Barkley, thank you very much. Before I call the question, I will say that the proclamation of Fire Prevention Week is something that is always very important to me. So I'm glad to see it here and look forward to more information coming from certainly the chief and his colleagues on how we make sure that everyone in North Grenville is aware of Fire Prevention Week. I'll call the question. All in favor? Good. That passes. So with that in mind, we're going to invite, under Planning and Development, a presentation on residential rodent control. And I'd like to welcome Jeff this evening. He will be here to provide 2 updates on both a proposed bylaw amendment and a potential rebate program. It may be no surprise to some of us that the reality of pests in our community persists, and we look forward to what the planning department has on offer this evening to help residents and businesses manage it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff would like council, or we'd like to propose to council to establish a residential rodent control rebate program, and it's to assist residential property owners financially with rodent control measures. If we can go to the next slide, please. The program would offer homeowners a rebate up to $200 per year for services from a licensed pest control company. It would cover a cost up to 50% to a maximum of the $200. And be available to residential property owners to help financially with the cost of the control measures. Next slide, please. Rodents are becoming more common in the urban areas within the municipality, but it's also a rural issue. In 2022, Bylaws services have received 7 complaints. Those are formal complaints. There were other ones that weren't recorded relating to rodent infestation issues. Bylaws services conducted a limited canvass of the downtown area, and at that time, we identified 13 different homeowners who came forward and reported seeing rodents on their property, and they knew it was an issue to the municipality. The canvass did not locate any specific cause or food sources that we can isolate. Rodents are carriers of diseases and can cause damage to property, and that is the reason for this program that I'm proposing today. Private property owners need to be diligent, so the process involved in what I'm proposing is that first the homeowners would have to do their own work, look around their own property to ensure it's free of any waste, of potential food sources, water, or habitat sources. They are encouraged to do their own baiting, trying to capture or get rid of those rodent infestations on their property. And if they're still having difficulties, they should contact Bylaws Services at that point, where one of the Bylaws Services officers would attend and see if they can determine where the cause is and how they can help in either addressing it under a property standards or a yards bylaw prior to moving forward. And at that point, and on the next slide, please, they can arrange, if they can't identify the cause or help that individual, the property owner can apply at that point through the program and also contact a licensed pest control company to bait the exterior of the property. As they are the professionals, they know the proper tools to use to attract and to capture or get rid of those rodents. They would complete an application that we would have on the website for the rebate program, and they would provide a paid or copy of the paid invoice or the original to the municipality. At that point, the municipality planning clerk will review the application for eligibility and submit it for payment at that point. And again, they would receive up to 50% of the invoice cost, up to $200. And that's for help those homeowners who are having difficulties financially. Now, there are limitations to the program. It would only apply to licensed Canadian pest control companies they would have to hire. It would be for residential property owners only, so commercial and multi-unit properties are not eligible for the program. It does not cover the cost of products purchased at your local store, retail store, and it only applies to abating the exterior of a property. And again, it would only cover up to 50%, up to the $200 annual rebate. The financial impact to the municipality and taxpayers, it would be, I would propose it be for the 2023 budget year. We were recommending a $10,000 budget starting point, and we will reevaluate that on a yearly basis, and we would start the program January 1st and monitor it regularly. In the staffing implications, the program will involve resources of the bylaw services and the municipal planning clerk. Bylaw services officers will continue to respond to rodent infestation complaints and investigate accordingly. And that again could be in regards to property standards or yards issues where they could potentially deal with it in that method. Bylaw service officers will record their findings on the records management system, and on a yearly basis, the calls for service will be analyzed as part of the program. I will evaluate that prior to the next financial budget year. The municipal planning clerk, upon receipt of a rebate application form, will confirm the applicant's eligibility and process for its reimbursement. On the form itself, it would outline the criteria for that to help the applicant as well. And the communication to the members of the public, the municipality will deliver details about the new program to the community by social media and via a dedicated webpage on the municipality's website. And I would suggest also handing out flyers, and hopefully local media can help spread the word. The webpage will include best practices on how to control rodent infestations and the process on applying for the new program. That is all. Any questions?
Councillor Barclay?
Yes, thank you for that report, and thank you for a well-thought-out program, but it is a pilot program, and we really won't see how well it works until, I guess, the end of next year. I'm just curious, under what circumstances would an application be denied or declined? I mean, given that they fit all the eligibility. Is it conditional on some proof of baiting or trying to handle the problem? How do we go about assessing that they've taken those preliminary steps?
They would have to, first of all, contact bylaw services. We would attend to see exactly where the issue. First of all, is it outside? Is it, have they cleaned up their property? Or is it possibly a neighbor's issue where property standards and yards would be applicable, where they would enforce? If LMI measures are taken into consideration and they would apply and it's still an issue, then we would only be looking at, have they exceeded their $200 budget allocation for that year? And are they a homeowner? Specifically, it's pretty wide open. It would have to be exterior of the property only, though.
We're anticipating, or we can handle up to about 50 applications over the course of the year.
That's correct.
Did you look at other programs that obviously other municipalities had? How did you arrive at that $10,000 ceiling?
Correct. So the $10,000 ceiling was in regards to the current complaints that we received and the talk around the community. I think it's a good start. And again, we would reevaluate that as we go along, and maybe perhaps throughout the year, if we require more of increase in the budget, we can apply to do so. I think it's a low ceiling, and I know I understand it's taxpayers' money, but it's to make sure that it is spent accordingly and properly.
Councillor Wilson?
I'm happy to see this, through you, Madam Mayor, happy to see this come about, but some of the complaints that we've had, some of the residents are saying it's costing them over $1,000 a year to get rid of the problem, and it's consolidated to a certain area, so it's several residences in the neighborhood. So, and if we're going to begin by helping them with the rat problem, or rodent problem, sorry, how this may extrapolate to a pigeon problem, a skunk problem, or a raccoon problem. We may get that little trickle-down effect, is where someone will say, well, if you're going to take care of rodents, you might as well take care of these sort of things. So I'm just going with what I'm going to hear back. Yeah, that's about all. Thanks.
No, I understand that, and we had those discussions as well in the office. It's just, at this point, it's becoming more of a problem. The community's talking about it on social media. People want something to be done, and this is a proposal for council to decide based on the recommendations and homework. And we did review other programs with Peel and Niagara Region, where they have similar programs. And I think in a year from now, we can reevaluate to see if it is successful, and moving forward, we can reevaluate at that time.
Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor, to Jeff Bull. Anyway, sorry. Is this fairly new, these complaints, that the elevated number of reports? And I know that the next item on the agenda has to do with demolition of buildings. Is this the source, the current source of the increased number of rodents and complaints that are coming forward? And will better management of demolition of properties help to reduce this in the future?
There's no evidence that I've found. I've only been in this position for about 4 months now.
Okay.
Since I've been here, I've been told that there was an issue prior, but it has been escalating.
Okay.
The demolition of different buildings in the community have been brought up, and I know there are concerns as well in different municipalities where they have similar programs to the next one I'll be presenting. We have to look at everything to try to resolve the issue. I think the measures that we bring forward with when we demolish a building may help with that as well at the next presentation.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Knight.
Just to add to Mr. Barable's comments, I think they've put a really good program together. It's been consistent with a lot you see in Southern Ontario, but what's really strong about it is it's like an iterative process. We're addressing it not just outside baiting. It talks about education. It talks about property standards and how, so we can educate the public how to do things beyond baiting, like control your garbage, watch for things, you see things, report property standards infractions to the to bylaw as well. And the demolition piece that Mr. Barable was bringing forward is another add-on to that. So we're making sure that it may not be a one-to-one cause and effect relationship between demolition and that, but it's another step we're taking to ensure that it doesn't exacerbate a problem. So it's kind of like a building block process that hopefully, as we go by time, to Councillor Barclay's question, is the rebates aren't needed as much because we have better education and controls throughout the municipality.
If I could just, Councillor Sullivan, certainly in some discussions that Councillor Wilson and I had with a couple of neighborhoods, certainly in Kemptville, I think challenge is not all households are equally resourced to call in that pest control management when things begin to get out of hand. So you can have a couple of households that maybe are really on top of it, but some neighboring households may not be. So as a consequence, we've seen a surge in populations of rats in particular, and they're persisting, and those populations appear to be fluctuating, right, over time. But certainly I think this program is designed to equip all those who may be impacted certainly where the population is persistent and growing, that's where I think the major issue is, and at some point it can risk to become a public health issue. So if we can equip people not just through the rebate program, but through conversation with Bylaw, and they have to contact Bylaw to even begin the process of seeking some compensation through the rebate program, it, I think, will enable a fulsome conversation on how to diminish the risk of rodents becoming a problem. But certainly, you know, I think there's a distinction to be made between a rural property where, sure, you may see a few rodents from time to time, and areas, particularly urban, unfortunately, where in certain neighborhoods where households are in close proximity, and as we do infill, right, developments, the reality is it's easy for a rodent population to potentially risk getting out of control. And I think part of the effort here with the program is to try to ensure that every household is well equipped to manage the rodent issue, so that everyone is sort of on the same page and working together. So I don't expect every household to in fact seek the rebates. I wouldn't expect that would happen, but I do believe that there are certain households that if they saw that the rebate program was there, they may in fact feel more confident engaging the services of a professional pest control company, and that can certainly go a long way once you've reached sort of a tipping point of the rodent population being more than one household can manage. So that's certainly my understanding based upon the conversations certainly that Councillor Wilson and I think others perhaps around the table have been having. And I don't know, Mr. Barabo, if you have anything else to add on that front.
Nope, no other question.
Okay. Councillor Wilson?
And I might add, through you, Madam Mayor, sorry, to add the why we would not add to commercial properties this incentive is because commercial properties are required to have their own pest control systems. So that's why it would only be pertaining to residential. But I had some other thought on my mind and I've just lost it. So anyways, thanks.
So colleagues, the recommendation is before you to approve the residential rodent control program as proposed in the report with the ceiling of $200 per residential property per calendar year, and to allocate $10,000 in the upcoming 2023 budget to support the program and direct staff to monitor and report back at the end of 2023. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Strachan, thank you. Any further comments? I know we're going to speak to demolition, and that is its own issue and has been part of certainly the conversations I've been having, but any other comments or questions? Go ahead.
It's a minor detail, but it might mean something later on. Can we say it's a residential rodent control pilot rebate program?
Sure.
Can we include pilot?
Yep.
Thanks.
No problem. Yes, please.
Just from a clarity standpoint, from we're allocating in the budget process, so we're looking to not have it a permanent program? Okay.
Okay. So we're going to insert the word pilot. We understand that this program may be phased out, but certainly the reality is we have neighborhoods that are contending with it now, and I think some of them are feeling overwhelmed. And I think if there's a full-scale effort here, I think our hope is that we can do our best to mitigate moving into the future. So motion's been read, moved and seconded. If there's nothing else, I will call the question. All in favor? Good, thank you. And that carries. So Mr. Barabo will move on, and I'm pleased to see this as part of the package of what's being discussed tonight. We've had a lot of questions about what happens when buildings are issued that permit for demolition, and how can we better potentially anticipate the need for vermin control. So welcome this report.
Thank you, Your Worship. So staff would like council to approve or proposes that we enact bylaw 80-22 to amend the building bylaw 02-21 to include provisions for vermin control ahead of a demolition of a building. Planning and Development has received an increase in public comments regarding the potential of buildings or for buildings being demolished to push vermin into surrounding residential neighborhoods. We are proposing to amend the building bylaw to require owners of a building to be demolished to provide a letter from a licensed pest control company stating that the building has been inspected and no evidence of vermin infestation has been found, or that vermin control has been completed no more than 7 days prior to the date on which the demolition is to be commenced. And again, education would be done on both on the websites and including communication through our building department when somebody applies and seeks information, and it would be on the application permit as well.
Excellent, thank you. So any questions, colleagues, in regards to this one? Certainly, I'll recognize Councillor Wilson first.
To you, Your Worship. Would this pertain to rural residents or rural buildings that are being torn down?
I think we can have those discussions further. I think it would be a good opportunity to bring that in as well. I think those infestations can still spread to your neighbor, even though it's rural. I think it would be smart to include it as well, in my opinion.
Thank you.
And, Mr. Barrow, have you defined vermin control when you mean, what is vermin in the technical definition?
Can I?
Or Mr. Dyke, you want to?
No, I'm going to turn it over. I just want to, can I add to your question?
Please.
Because I think consistency is a matter, Mr. Barrow, because we've talked about the rodent bylaw, and now we're talking about vermins. There was a question about bats, pigeons, things of that nature. Maybe that's good from a clarity standpoint.
So I apologize. This presentation was created from a colleague of mine, or actually the Director of Planning and Development. And so I think the definition would be the same. It would be a rodent. Dealing with mostly rats at that point.
Is it limited to rats?
I think we could probably, for demolition, we can probably expand that a little bit to potentially including different species, but again, we can have that discussion. I think it'd be good to.
Okay. Any other questions? Are you familiar, Mr. Barrow, with whether or not other municipalities have similar requirements?
I know I have been involved in communication regarding this proposal. I know Windsor City has it right directly within their application process as well, that you would require this
Excellent.
letter.
Mr. Dyke?
Just to echo Mr. Barrow's comments, so both this amending bylaw and the previous program are consistent with programs we're seeing in larger centers across southwestern Ontario, so there is a consistency across the province in the application, both on monetary value and applicability.
Okay. When it comes to demolition, yep, great. Well, certainly from our perspective, there's nothing to lose here, I think, in ensuring that those who are demolishing buildings bear the responsibility to ensure that there isn't a rodent population that has manifested over time and may have availed of a vacant building and the shelter that's been offered. So it seems logical to me, but I'll recognize Councillor Sullivan and Councillor Barclay. And then Councillor Strachan. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. I have a question regarding the requirement for a demolition permit. Is there a particular size of building, location of building, et cetera, that requires a permit and others that would not require a permit? Like I'm thinking of an old kind of falling down garage or an old shed or an old barn, because the demolition of that sometimes could just occur without a permit, and then the rats and bats are out already. So is there anything that we can do about that?
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer on regards to the building side of what is required for the demolition permit. I think we can explore that further in what sizes we can be part of the application process. I think we have experienced it in our community recently where a barn was involved with a rat infestation, for example, and I think it would be a good to include that as well. That's my opinion.
Okay, because I think we know that maybe the demolition of the old Kempville Public School resulted in some four-leggeds getting out and about, but I think that it could happen if an older property has an old garage or shed and they tore that down. It could also be a source of wild
Yes, it could.
rodents getting out. Thank you.
For recognizing Councillor Barclay and Councillor Strakian, Mr. Dyke, just wanted to get in there.
Yeah, just to add to Mr. Bibro's point, so the demolition permit system is similar to the building permit system. There are regulations to when they're required to go forward. So there will be structures that would not fall under the requirement for a demolition permit. But again, they're usually quite small in size, so the theory being, in particular this file, the opportunity for an infestation type of thing would be limited. And so, but this would only be applicable to people going through, that would be required to get a permit, and then we rely on our other programs, our educational programs, and our property standards programs to try to be preventative on the accumulation of rodents, primarily in the urban area.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Barclay, Councillor Strakian.
I think my question's been answered. I don't think demolishing a barn requires a permit, so this thing, this bylaw amendment wouldn't apply, so.
Okay, Councillor Strakian.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Jeff, for both of those reports. I think this is good progress being made here. The second one here, though, focuses on the demolishment of a building. With the prevalence and the want to have infill housing in a lot of vacant lots and so on in the downtown core, if buildings that ground is being, disturbed and, houses are being put on there, is there a possibility that we could see any rodents that would be taking up space in those fields move into adjacent properties? And then how would that be captured if that is a possibility?
Under this program, I don't think it would capture it. It would be more on the demolition side of things, but property standards and yards bylaw would be applicable, where we would follow up with complaints and try to identify those rodents in specific areas and deal with those measures.
So they wouldn't fall under the sort of preventive one that we have here, and they wouldn't fall under the second one where it would become the responsibility of the homeowner either, correct? Right?
It would just be you're talking about a yard potentially for construction down in the future?
Yeah, like if there's, I mean, I'm just assuming that rats will live where they want to live. And so if there's, vacant areas right now that we're looking to, give permits for infill housing, it doesn't seem to me that those spaces would be captured by either one of these bylaws that you've presented. So
I'll just ask Mr. Dyke, I think he has a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, either to Councillor Strachan. So those type of things, we can incorporate that into the site plan control, site alteration bylaws when you're dealing with the vacant land, because you're exactly correct. And depending on where you are in a construction area, low-lying areas, boggy areas, that there can be the presence of the road, and so those things can be incorporated into the site plan, site alteration piece.
okay, thank you.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from council colleagues is they don't want overreach on the bylaw when it comes to the demolition of smaller structures. We don't want to burden residents, right, with unnecessary provisions around rodent control. But at the same time, what I certainly have heard up to now is that when we're demolishing larger structures that have been vacant or dormant for quite some time, we have observed that, in fact, rodent populations have, in fact, taken full advantage of those larger vacant spaces. And the minute they come down, those rodents, often rats, are looking for other homes. And I think that's where we've seen some surges in populations, anecdotally, of course. So I think the intention with the bylaw, if I understand it, is where that demolition permit is required, and there's already a regulatory framework in place requiring the building owner who's demolishing to ensure that they're not displacing large numbers of rodents that then becomes somebody else's problem, usually small homeowners, is not something we want. So with that in mind, I think that, if I understand correctly, is the intention of this bylaw. Do I have that right, Mr.
That is correct.
Mr. Dyke? Okay. And the provisions around a demolition permit, can you speak to them at all? Is it for particularly large buildings, or what's the?
Without getting into Your
Yeah.
Worship, getting into specifics of my knowledge of the building code
Indeed.
is veneer thin at times. But it's clearly articulated when a demolition permit is
Right.
required. And so this provision would only kick in when you
Yes.
required a demolition permit.
Okay. And I'm assuming it has to do with the size of the building overall, correct? Okay. Okay. So would anyone like to move the recommendation that council approve and enact bylaw 8022 to amend the building bylaw to include provisions for vermin control ahead of the demolition? Councilor Strachan? Councilor O'Sullivan? Thank you. Any other comments or questions in regards to this? Seeing none, I will call a question. All in favor, please. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Barrow, for being here tonight. We appreciate your time. Thank you. All right, I think we're going over to Ms. Dunlop. Maybe I should, does council need a break? Are we good here to carry on? Yep, all right, we're going to carry on. So over to Ms. Dunlop in regards to acquisition and disposition of lands.
If I might, Madam Mayor, I'm just going to recuse myself from this discussion.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah,
that's right. And that
due
was
to
because
perceived
of a
potential
perceived
conflict.
declaration of conflict.
Yeah, with one of the parties. Thanks.
Okay, many thanks. We'll let you back in. If you feel like coming back. All right. Okay, over to you, Ms. Dunlop.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As per the closed session report of January and again in May 2022, staff have proceeded towards the disposition and acquisition of lands on and adjacent to the former rail lands north of 43, west of 416, and north of the undeveloped commercial lands. See the map up on the screen. The report provides for a 4-step recommendation that declares the lands owned by the municipality, seen on your map as blue, as surplus and authorize their disposition while also authorizing the transaction to purchase the available former railway lands for future recreational and drainage purposes. And finally, to authorize the Director of Public Works to execute the agreement of purchase and sale documents. Staff have negotiated the terms of the land transaction with the owner and are seeking council's authority to complete the transaction. And that completes my report.
Thank you. Ms. Dunlop, there was some concern about the accuracy of the map. Has
That is
that
correct.
been?
That has been adjusted. The original map that was included in council's package had, if you see the chunk on your map that is blue, is the 20 plus acres owned by the municipality. Right. Sections of the rail trail, which are identified in, the former rail land, are identified in a pinky color. It actually extended down to 43 in error. We are looking to purchase and actually have everything from Potter Road down to the Rosewater lands, or commercial lands, under municipal ownership. So this is a small chunk we already own, plus all the other landowners' holdings.
Understood. Okay. Council colleagues, as was referenced, we've had this discussion in closed. This is the report out in terms of the value and logic of moving forward. So I will look for a mover and seconder for the recommendations as presented. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Seconder. Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. You'll see the 4 points there. We're authorizing the transaction for the disposal and acquisition of the land as set out in closed session. Report of May 17th. Number 2, declare the lands legally described as Part Lot 13, Concession 7, South Gore, Part 1, 15R, 11324, Municipality of North Grenville, as surplus, and authorize their disposition, acquire the acquisition of the lands as spelled out in point number 3, and authorize the Director of Public Works to execute the agreement of purchase and sale and all necessary documents to complete the transaction. So it's been moved and seconded. I'll look for any final comments or questions. Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Good. Thank you. So then maybe we'll just take a second to welcome Councillor Barkley back in. Thank you, Chelsea. Appreciate it. All right. Now we'll move on. Under Director Dunlop, we have the waste diversion rate pilot program. Perhaps Councillor Barkley thought we'd be a little bit longer, but I think he's familiar with this program. So you can start, Director Dunlop, and we'll take a pause before the vote if Mr. Barkley isn't back. All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this will cover an option for non-profit organizations associated with the reuse activity and tipping fees at the Oxford Mills Waste Transfer Station as per the notice of motion from council. Next slide. This report will explore options for waiving tipping fees for North Grenville's charitable sector with a reuse activity. Next slide. An incentive-based pilot program can begin with council's approval and is an application-based system. The application is to be used to demonstrate that the organization has a commitment to waste diversion in order to be eligible for up to a $3,000 annual forgiveness of tipping fees. This program would be administered by the Public Works Department. Next slide. The intake would review charitable status of the organization and the incentives the organization utilizes to reduce the amount of waste going to landfills, while recognizing the benefits the organization provides to the communities and the pressures that result from the disposal of products that cannot be reused. And that concludes my report.
Okay. Colleagues, any questions on this? I know Councillor Barkley, I think you initially brought it forward for Director Dunlop's review. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I brought it forward. I was approached by the manager of the Habitat for Humanity Restore, looking for some relief from tipping fees, because not everything that they bring in or have donated gets sold, and so they often end up with a lot of material to get rid of. So we asked how much on an annual basis their tipping fees were, and I think it was $3,500 or $4,000 a year. So it's not huge, unlike the tipping fees that the Salvation Army pays. But I think they contract privately. They have private waste disposal, because their volumes are much higher. So I thought it was worthwhile to take a look at what we could do. Certainly it has to apply for everybody, and it's not specific to the Restore. But so I think it's a good program that they've come up with, and I'd like to support it.
Thank you. Any other questions, concerns on this one? All right. Do we have a mover and seconder? Councillor Barkley, seconder. Councillor Sullivan, thank you. And that is that council approve the waste diversion rate pilot program for non-profit organizations for waste associated with the reuse activity. Certainly seems very worthwhile to me, so I look forward to it continuing. A timeline for the pilot. Director Dunlop?
Thank you, Your Worship. The pilot program can begin with the passing. It will be recorded as a revenue loss under the waste management program and will be reported back.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Sullivan? So, like a year, 6 months, a year? You really should use your mic, right? It doesn't make sense to not use your mic.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Mayor. So a pilot for a year, and then, sorry, I can't see you, and then reevaluate at 6 months and again at a year. Is that fair?
The pilot program is anticipated to be a fiscal year in the running.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Dyke.
I speak to that, and I apologize, Council and Director Dunlop, because I've brought this up before. Typically, on projects of this nature, I would ask Council to indulge an extended pilot project of 18 months to 24 months to properly evaluate the impact. Sometimes in a year, from an educational uptake in the community, sometimes it may be better to go a bit longer just to see the value of it. I would just offer that for consideration.
Okay. Director Dunlop, you have that direction then?
Thank you very much. I'll record it as such, and we'll do reportings back in about a year and then a year later.
Okay, sounds good to me. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, please? Good, thank you. And appreciate your responsiveness on getting that going. Next, disability traffic signs.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is based on the multiple requests the municipality has received over the past few months and years for disability traffic signage. Next slide. There is no current working policy for the installation of disability traffic signage. These signs are intended to warn drivers that a person on the roadway may not react in an expected manner due to a hearing impairment or other disability. Next slide. The intent of this policy is to provide a uniformity for a standardized symbol with an identification tab as depicted on the next slide. Next slide. This gives examples of typical signage that has been used throughout the organization or throughout the industry. Next slide. The intent of this policy is to ensure that the signage is installed only as required and removed when no longer required through an application process that is renewable at no cost to the individual requesting the signage. Next slide. Samples of a disabled sign application have also been included in your package. Next slide. This is provided for discussion purposes and for council to direct staff to formalize a policy and return to council for approval. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Councillor Barclay, and then I'll put myself on the list.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Director Dunlop. We currently have some signs up, hearing impaired or blind person signs, I believe. I've seen them. Is that a cost sharing? We install, but they pay for the cost of the sign? And do you anticipate the same policy for these signs?
The municipality currently does not have a council-approved policy. Historically, in the past, does not mean that things can't change. It has been at the user's request and cost for these to be installed.
Okay, so a policy would going forward, would be able to address those kinds of signs.
That is correct.
Yeah.
The intent of this policy is that once an application and a need is identified on a renewable basis, the installation and maintenance of these signs would be at municipal cost.
And the cost of the sign itself?
That is correct.
Is that a cost as well?
That is
okay.
to be included under the policy as a municipal cost.
Okay, great, thanks.
I think the notion is, this has come up in a number of different requests, that there's a collective benefit to this signage. So to put the burden entirely on the person who may be deaf or may have a sight impairment or a mobility impairment is not fair. Often persons with disabilities are lower income, and the value of the signage extends well beyond the individual. It's a public service to all who travel those roads, not just those living on the roads, but those who travel them. So what we've heard in a couple of instances is that people aren't able to necessarily afford the sign or feel that the collective benefit extends beyond them. So it's to take the financial burden exclusively off of the person or the family where the individual living with a disability is, and to make it more of a public good, if you will. And certainly given the many, many concerns about road safety in this community, I believe that there would be general support for that. I think the caveat, as Director Dunlop has explained, is these are not whimsical requests. You need to qualify under the Ontario Disabilities Act for a disability that is recognized as such. And obviously we accommodate persons with disabilities in other ways in our community because we offer an accessible transit system and are working hard to create other road safety measures. But the caveat, of course, is that the disability is one that is recognized under provincial legislation. So, Councillor Sullivan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I sit on the Accessibility Advisory Committee, and I will be very happy to move this motion and to share this news with them, because I think every step forward we make is a big improvement for their lives and
Indeed.
safety. Thank you.
Councillor Barclay, did you have something else to add? No. Okay. Any other comments, concerns? Okay. Well, thank you. So I want to thank Director Dunlop. We have a mover for the motion. I need a seconder, please. Councillor Strachan, thank you. And that is that we receive the report titled Disability Traffic Signs in support of the new initiative and direct staff to formalize a disability traffic sign installment policy. Director Dunlop, what would be the timeline for that?
Thank you, Your Worship. The draft policy as well as the draft application have been created. It is, as I said, in draft format. It would have to be reviewed by the Clerk's Department for AODA compliance, as well as the comments from the Accessibility Advisory Committee would be greatly received in regards to moving it forward.
Okay. So it's in play. So we would expect it potentially by the end of the year. Is that right?
As long as we receive feedback, Your Worship, from the Accessibility Advisory Committee, okay. I would say yes.
Okay. Excellent. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please. Thank you. And thank you, Director Dunlop. I know you and I have had some conversations of late based upon a couple of requests, so I appreciate you formalizing that into a policy framework to get us started. Thank you. So we'll carry on. There's a number of items under the consent agenda, but under Parks and Rec. Oh, do we have, am I missing an item, Ms. Workman, for Public Works?
You had requested that 2 items be added to the agenda. Would you like to
Indeed.
discuss them now?
Right. I think we were thinking they were under Parks and Recreation, though I think Director Dunlop, you were giving those reports. Is that right?
That is correct, Your Worship, so whenever you wish, I can give you the update, what I have.
Okay. Well, you're on a roll, so why don't we keep going? So, council colleagues, you may recall we amended the agenda so that Director Dunlop, in this instance, even though these are partly Parks and Rec matters, could speak to the dedication of Tempo Parkland in the neighborhood of Tempo, just across the street here. And I also understand that we did ask for a report on the tot lot for Creekside. I understand, Director Dunlop, that you don't have a report on that this evening, but certainly among Council, I think we can just sort of clarify why we have that interest in seeing that tot lot come forward, but appreciate that given the short notice, you don't have a report to offer this evening, and I assume you're speaking on behalf of yourself and Mr. Guy in regards to the Tempo Parklands. Is that a safe assumption?
That is, yes, both the Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture and Public Works, we've been working together on this specific issue. We'll start the ball rolling and then they can complete it at the end. But in regards to the specific lands adjacent to the Tempo subdivision, we have been working as well with the Planning Department to coordinate the acquisition of approximately 0.74 hectares of land on the south side of Despenser, adjacent to the Tempo subdivision. Currently, we do have an agreement in principle with the landowner, as they will be developing some other lands in the near future. So at this point in time, we are looking at completing the quoting system for both the survey to outlay the specifics of the park for approval by the landowners, as well as to complete a phase 1 environmental assessment, as is always done for municipal acquisition of lands. Once that is completed, as part of the 2023 budgetary process, it is my understanding for any work to be completed on that specific land will move forward to council for the 2023 budget year.
Thank you, and I know that certainly that initial invitation for the neighboring landowner adjacent to Tempo to sort of advance some parkland dedication for the certainly benefit of the Tempo neighborhood, and potentially others, happened back in 2020. So, and that formalized itself into a written agreement of some sort. What's your expectation in terms of the timeline for the survey and the actual acquisition of lands? I understand that those lands would be acquired at no cost because we would be recognizing some advanced parkland dedication as part of a future development where that individual would have to set aside that 5% parkland in any case. Can you just speak to timelines?
The survey and the phase 1 environmental assessment should be completed within the 2022 fiscal year. That way it gives us the ability to complete any legal severances, which would be required to place that land into the municipal ownership in anticipation for the 2023 budget year. So 2022, we'll do all the paperwork, and then we'll be able to do some development if approved under the 2023 budget.
And do you have concerns about the environmental status of the lands?
I do not, personally I do not, but of course I cannot until the desktop process for a phase 1 EA. It is my understanding that that land has never been used for anything such as a gas station, automotive repair, etc., but that is the sorts of things that are completed with a phase 1 EA.
Okay. And then do you need anything from this council in order to action this item. I know that there is, I want to recognize there is some frustration among, members of the Tempo subdivision. Many of them felt that they were coming into a subdivision with a small dedicated park in order to provide a gathering space. We understand that the developer at the time did not proceed with those plans, it is that led us, I think, as a council to really wanting to see if we could create that parkland and that gathering space. There's a lot of turnover in Tempo in terms of families moving in, families moving out. So I think certainly there's a lot of value in proceeding with the acquisition of those lands. But I want to be sure that from your end of things, there's no perception of need to delay in terms of the actual formalization of those lands.
At this point in time, I'm here this evening with an information report only. Once we are at the process of acquisition for lands, that has to come in front of council for the execution of the agreement. So that's when we will be back in front of you.
And at this point, you expect the survey and the EA on the lands to be done by the end of this year?
I am hoping by the end of November at the latest.
Okay. Council colleagues, any other questions on this? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. In terms of the tot lot, which is, I know, an issue that's been close to Councillor Sullivan's heart, is there anything you'd like to say on that? I know Ms. Dunlop doesn't have a report, but we have put it on the agenda, so I'm not sure. It is another neighborhood where the creation of a little bit of gathering space, I know, is regarded as very valuable by residents.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to clarify, it's the Creek subdivision,
I apologize.
not Creekside.
I apologize.
Yes, definitely there's a big desire to have a tot lot there, and I'm under the impression that the developer is going to make space for that, but I'd like to see that formalized and clarified for sure. So as soon as we can get that done, that'd be great, because it's a high-density residential area with a lot of families, and there's no specific place for them to go play and hang out. So, thanks.
So maybe Mr. Dyke report can be brought back to council in a week just to get that update on the tot lot. Thank you, because I think we have one more council meeting. Okay. And certainly I think these conversations are coming up in terms of parks and recreation, because there's a lot of enthusiasm in our community for parks and rec, and in a couple of instances we're embarking upon corrective action, if you will, where a park wasn't anticipated or created by the developer, and the municipality is in the position of having to look at how we can retroactively create, very small parks along the lines of what you see on Maley Street, where there was a small parkette created, but it tends to get a lot of use and brings people together. And I think certainly the spirit of this community is one where we connect people and ensure that there is some opportunity for cohesion and for physical activity. So look forward to seeing those things come to fruition. So I think that will conclude, Ms. Dunlop, your reports, more or less. We know that we have Waste Reduction Week, but we've dealt with that on the consent agenda, and there'll be lots of communications moving forward. So under Parks, Rec, and Culture, I believe I'm welcoming Christine. Welcome. And you're going to speak to the Prescott Street Accessible Floating Dock.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is on the Prescott Street Accessible Floating Dock to be installed at South Branch near Rotary Park. The purpose of this dock is to increase access to the water for both boats and kayaks, allowing North Grenville to seize new market opportunities in nature-based tourism. The installation of the dock will create a gateway to the water near local businesses that was previously inaccessible to residents. External consultant Waterside Dock Systems has quoted the dock at $79,298 plus HST, with installation at an additional $6,100 plus HST. The funders of this project have offered to contribute up to $90,000, 50% of which has been already paid to the municipality of North Grenville. To remain eligible for the remaining 50% of the funding, staff would like to recommend that the municipality purchase the dock and pay for installation before December 31st, 2022. However, the dock itself does not need to be installed until 2023. That concludes this report. Thank you.
And so just to be clear, I had understood that there was an external grant obtained for the installation of the dock, and does it cover 100% of the fees?
It is a total of $90,000, which with both the quote for the dock and the installation, I think covers up pretty much 100%. I will have to double check, but it is very close to 100%.
And could you, Ms. Workman, just move the slide back one? The funders of this project, the funders of this project, up to $90,000. I see. Municipality will need to purchase, I see. Okay. So it is 100% covered, is that what I'm gathering?
I think it is close to 100% covered. The numbers I can't do quite in my head.
Indeed.
Very quickly.
Okay.
But
And can you clarify, this is a grant from which level of government?
federal.
It was a federal grant?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Well, we know that people like docks in North Grenville, so it's great to see it come to fruition. And the installation in the middle of winter isn't really an issue. I know we usually pull up our docks, so will it be put in the water?
Yeah, we can pull it in the water and pull it back out.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. And that's the way that you can make sure that the costs are covered. Is that the case?
Yeah.
Okay. Council colleagues, anything on this? I'm sorry, I apologize. Councillor O'Sullivan and Barclay? Councillor Barclay O'Sullivan. Okay.
Yeah, I expect we might have the same question. So we're prepaying for the installation, even though it won't go into the water until 2023. But we're prepaying for the installation in order to qualify for that remaining half of the $90,000. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks.
Okay. Councillor O'Sullivan.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my question is, the dock that's currently there, that's going to be replaced, is it useful to be moved somewhere else? Because I know that part of the concern about that dock right now is that it's very high out of the water, and so for canoes or kayaks, it's difficult to get in and out of there. So I'm wondering, is there useful life in that dock to be moved somewhere else? Because we're looking to have more access to the waterways, if possible. So it would be nice if we could use it somewhere else, if possible.
Thank you for your question. That's something I'll have to ask the tourism coordinator and the director of Parks and Rec about. It's a very good point, and I think it would be a really good idea to push it somewhere else.
Thank you.
Okay. So, colleagues, I'll look for a mover and a seconder that council authorize the purchase of an accessible floating dock and pay for the installation before December 31, 2022. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Wilson, thank you. Any further comment or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That is done. All right. Moving on. Thank you, Chief, for being here. Your item is under the consent agenda, but look forward to getting more information on Fire Prevention Week as the municipality communicates out on a very crucial, certainly crucial information period when it comes to fire prevention. And I want to thank you again for all of the work your service undertook at the International Plowing Match. A big presence there, a very strong presence in terms of education and materials and awareness raising. So thank you to you and your fire prevention officer and the volunteer fire service who showed up, and the deputy fire chief as well, for a team effort. It was great to see. All right, so correspondence, council colleagues, we've dealt with just one other item of business. We do have a planning meeting that was set a number of weeks ago that is rather mandatory for next week, but the prospect of canceling our meeting of October 18th is one that we need to decide upon this evening. I have been a strong advocate of canceling that meeting because it is during, right in the middle of the election period. As most of us are aware, the election starts in terms of online and telephone voting on October 17th, so it's a very active week. So my humble suggestion is that we consider canceling October 18th, but it requires a council vote. So looking for thoughts and opinions on October 18th. Councillor Barclay?
Has the agenda been set for the 12th? Do we know if we've got enough time to cover everything we want to get?
The 12th or the 18th? You're talking
Yeah.
next Wednesday?
Yeah, next
For
Wednesday.
the meeting
Is
that
it a
we are-
full agenda? Are
I
we?
believe it's particular to planning matters mostly.
Yeah, no, they're required, but.
Indeed.
Okay.
Mr. Dyke, can you speak to the planning? Oh, Ms. Workman, thank you.
Thank you. There are 3 public meetings within that meeting, in addition to OVI, and then there's 2 other items from other departments as of right now.
Great. Does that answer your question, Councillor Barkley?
Partially. Is there anything else that we want to accomplish before we retire as a council? That could be handled on the 18th? Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's ask Ms. Workman. Certainly, I think the intention initially was to accommodate any pending items at next week's meeting, because we are convening once again, and even though it's primarily focused on planning matters, it is a meeting of council, so we can address other items. So at this time, I don't believe you have anything for the 18th at this stage. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have ensured that the agendas can accommodate for tonight and the 12th.
Okay. Any other comments, colleagues?
I guess the final thing, and I'll consult with Councillor O'Sullivan, the Arts and Culture Development Fund, to direct staff to produce a report at some later date is probably something that comes out of the minutes that will be presented on the 12th. So just want to make sure that we
Doesn't get lost.
well, we'll look at the consent agenda and pull those minutes off to
Sure.
suggest something. Thanks.
So it sounds like the arts and cultural policy is something you'd like to address next Wednesday, if I'm hearing you correctly?
Well, just to direct staff to produce a report at some later date
Okay,
on it. Yeah.
okay. Okay. Good. So then, do we need a motion to proceed with the cancellation of the meeting on the 18th?
Yes, please.
Okay. So do I have a mover and a seconder to cancel the meeting on October 18th? So remember, there are 2 meetings, the one we are holding next week and the one the week after. That is the one we're speaking of now. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Strachan, thank you. And that is, again, to cancel not next week's meeting, which is a planning meeting, and a meeting that can accommodate other council-related matters. It is to cancel the meeting on October 18th. So do I have a mover? I have a mover and seconder. Any other comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, now I'll move to notice of motions. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. I would like to make a notice of motion, please, that to direct staff to install a second or possibly, a third or fourth courtesy flagpole at the main entrance to the North Grenville Municipal Centre so that we can accommodate the requests that we get to fly courtesy flags, and that while doing so, the North Grenville Municipal flag will always be present.
Okay, so that's a notice of motion. So the actual discussion on the motion, in fact, would happen, I think, next week. So we can certainly have a fulsome discussion next week, and the relevant staff will be notified. Good. Okay, thank you for doing that. Any other notices of motion while we're at it? Okay. Seeing none, I'll move on. Introduction and consideration of bylaws. Have we dealt with our bylaws this evening, Ms. Workman?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So no need to go there. And any questions from those in the audience this evening, media or public? Yes. Welcome. Welcome, Ms. Westendorf.
Thank you, Nancy. I just have a couple questions. The first one is for Jeff. What has been the historical process of dealing with rat infestations in North Grenville?
Historically, the process would be dealing with complaints we receive through either the website or through telephone regarding property standards issues or yards bylaw issues, where our bylaw services officers would attend and investigate potential rodent infestations. And we would proceed that in that method, in that regards, regarding to the bylaw.
Do you know how many complaints were made in 2021 and 2020 regarding rats?
Unfortunately, I don't. We just recently moved to a new records management system, and that is the reason, unfortunately. We don't have those numbers in front of me.
Are they stored somewhere? Could you get me the
So-
numbers on that?
Potentially it wouldn't be accurate, unfortunately, I don't believe, because a lot of the complaints were received by telephone, were stored either electronically on a database or potentially in file folders. I'd have to review it all. I can give you a number potentially, but it might not be 100% accurate. I
Okay.
can do my best on that.
So you referred to the neighborhoods in your report. What neighborhoods specifically have been affected by these rodent infestations?
Most of the complaints, most of the communication is coming from the downtown area of Kemptville. They're through communication through bylaw services officer and speaking their conversations with members of the community. It is also a little bit of a rural issue, but mainly in the downtown Kemptville area.
Is North Grenville Bylaw Services seeing the rat population in North Grenville growing? Like, I'm curious of the trend, like why this new rebate program is being brought forward now. Is that in accordance with the growth in the rat population?
Based on what I've seen in the last 4 months since I've been here, in communication I've had with bylaw services officers, there is an increase. Again, I don't have those numbers. And sorry, what was your other question?
And Mr. Deck, go ahead.
Just to add to that, I think it's also, yes, we have received a number of complaints in the last little while, but I think it's also just another example of how we're modernizing our processes and creating a program by which we offer public education, but also support to people that need it to help mitigate problems in the community. So it's proactive and reactive at the same time. So it can be viewed as both. It's a response to a current issue, but it's also another example of how we're modernizing our process to serve the community.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering if it was a issue that was growing over recent years. That's why I was curious about the numbers from 2020 and 2021. Thank you.
I think my observation is it's a bit episodic. It appears that sometimes the demolition of large structures may create possible surges in populations if there is displacement. And certainly that's not unique to this year, but I think certainly in my time as sitting on council, this has been the year where we've heard a lot from, to Mr. Barabou's point, we've heard a lot from residents, largely in sort of downtown Kemptville, and in some cases people are really struggling. It's really dominated their experience, and the population. This is not an occasional rodent. These are rodents that are really established themselves in certain neighborhoods, and it's created a lot of distress in the community.
Yeah, I would just be curious to know the trend over
Yeah.
the last 5 years in terms of complaints and
For sure, and
rat
I think-
infestations in
Yeah.
North Grenville overall, if it's growing or not.
Yeah,
My
hopefully.
second question is for Karen. What is the cost of one of the disability signs that you discussed?
Currently, the cost of a post and blade running approximately $125. That does not include installation. Through you, Your Worship, sorry.
So is there a projected cost that's going to be included in the 2023 budget to include this new program, the pilot program? And what is that cost, sorry?
Through you, Your Worship. The Department of Public Works has a road signage budget that is typically approved within the operational component of the roads budget. So we do not anticipate that we will exceed that allotment. So it will be covered under the ops.
Also for Karen, with the parkland that you're exploring adjacent to the Tempo subdivision, where is that located adjacent to the subdivision?
Through you, Your Worship. The land, which is approximately 0.74 hectares, is right south of Depenser, so attached to Depenser, just east of the Tempo subdivision.
No, you had mentioned that this land in question, that the municipality is trying to acquire, is owned by a developer who's doing a future development. So would this land be gifted to the municipality in lieu of future parkland for that development that he's planning on building? He or she, sorry?
Again, through you, Your Worship, that's correct.
Ms. Dunlop, my understanding is that the land that is being gifted doesn't constitute the full 5%, that there is still other lands that would be dedicated to a future development. This is a small parcel that would count towards the 5%, but isn't the whole 5%? Do I have that right?
No, you have it absolutely correct.
Right.
This it will be a component of the 5%, just as a pre-dedication.
Indeed.
But it does depend on how much the specific developer brings forward. Of course, there are different parcels of land, severances that can take place, but it is to be incorporated into that 5% parkland in lieu.
So it's not intended to take away from future parkland development for a future development, but it is to take the opportunity to use a very small parcel of that 5%, given what we know now, so that Tempo has access to some parkland.
Do you know what percent it would be, Karen, of that 5, the 0.74 hectares? What would that constitute? You don't know?
Through you, Your Worship, no, I would not be able to hazard a guess at this point in time, based on, again, the development application that comes through, the type of application that comes, as well as the environmental sensitivities of that specific quadrant. There's a certain amount of wetlands that are also being evaluated. So it will be a component. There will be additional parklands required, but I can't tell you how much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Not seeing anything? Okay, great. So then we'll move to close of the meeting, and that is through our confirmation bylaw, looking for a mover and a seconder that bylaw 8222 to confirm proceedings of council and its regular meeting held on October 4, 2022 be adopted and passed. All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. We need a mover and a seconder. Okay. Councillor Wilson. Councillor Barkley, thank you. And then resolution to adjourn, Councillor Strachan and Councillor O'Sullivan. And certainly before I call that vote, I just want to say, as mayor, it's been a pleasure these last 4 years. I've certainly really cherished the opportunity to serve in this role, in this mandate of council, and want to thank everyone for their goodwill, enthusiasm, creativity, and I think commitment to making our community better. So this is obviously not a goodbye, but I just wanted to, in this mandate of council, so thank you for your efforts. We have one more meeting next week, but it's great to see that we're getting stuff done. So I'll call the question, a motion to adjourn at 8:13. All in favor? Thank you.